What's going on, guys? It's Justin from Push and Profit. Hope everyone's having a beautiful day today. Now, behind me on the screen, I have the hot IPO Snowflake being displayed. It was just IPO today, ticker symbol SNOW. So I want to talk about this. I want to talk about whether or not you should buy into Snowflake, and we're going to talk about this from two different perspectives. We're going to talk about this from the perspective of a trader and a perspective of a investor, right? Two different vehicles when it comes into the stock market. So we're going to kind of dive into both areas, right? Then I also want to talk about, what Warren Buffett did as far as investing into Snowflake, right? Now, Snowflake was only going to be IPO'd for $75. Then they doubled it to 110. And they just kept bringing the price up, making it like one of the hottest IPOs of the decade, right? I mean, I'm talking about after the whole .com era, right? This is probably one of the hottest IPOs of the decade, right? Now, when Snowflake was open to the general public, it actually opened at $240 per share. So I'm going to talk about that. Now, the reason this occurred is because a lot of individuals, they set their orders, right, to buy the stock. They might have set it, or they heard it was going to be for 100. So they're like, okay, I'm going to try to buy it at 120 just so it could get filled. I'm going to try to buy it at 130, 140, 150, right? So what happens when people do this? That alerts the market makers. They're like, let's make it a little higher. So from the jump, Snowflake opened at $240 and it hit a high of $319, right? Now it's kind of consolidating. It dipped really hard and now it's consolidating. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the technical aspect of everything that's going on. But I want to also mention about Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett is probably one of the most legendary investors of our time that we see. It's just amazing that he's still alive because I think he's in his 90s. But anyways, Warren Buffett typically does not invest in IPOs, right? He's been against it. And his ideology behind it is that what happens with IPOs is that a lot of people chase the hype and they're not really chasing the overall value of the company. And, people are trying to do this get rich quick scheme and it doesn't seem to work out. He says you shouldn't base your investments on that. So Warren Buffett doesn't invest in IPOs, but Warren Buffett invested heavily into Snowflake, right? Now, a quick thing about Warren Buffett that separates him from, us guys is that Warren Buffett didn't buy it at, 240. He actually bought the offering privately before it was, publicly offered, right? So to kind of put this in a nice little analogy, Warren Buffett basically, think of the stock as maybe a buffet table. Warren Buffett got to get a couple of plates off the buffet table before the buffet was open to the general public, right? So Warren Buffett had originally put $250 million into this, stock, right? And then it was allegedly rumored that he put an additional $250 million. So we're looking at half, we're looking at a lot of money over here, right? And now if Warren Buffett sold at the peak at 319, he would have made a profit of $1 billion in one day. Probably one of the quickest $1 billion I ever heard. Now, I am not sure if Warren Buffett sold his share or what his plan is. We're still unsure of that, right? But at one point in the day, Warren Buffett was up $1 billion. And he's still up because, again, he didn't buy at the price we bought. He bought at a much lower price. So he is just significantly up on his investment, right? It's unfortunate that we're not able to take part in that, but hey, it is what it is. Now, when it comes to investing in IPOs, right, after they're initially offered to the public, they're typically, right, IPOs the first day, they don't really perform well. And you could see, if you're looking at the chart, you could kind of see that. I don't know if my head's blocking it. And then even on the second day, maybe they're just not a good investment. And it could be a couple of weeks or a couple of months, right, before, IPOs actually show value. And this is because there's just a lot of hype in IPOs where people are just buying. There's a lot of selling pressure here and there. So it doesn't make sense as a long-term investment to get an IPO right away. And let's talk about Facebook, right? Facebook, when it IPO'd, it did terribly for the first days, weeks, months, even years, right? Facebook just wasn't a good stock until I think it was just a couple of years after its original IPO, where Facebook just became one of the greatest investments of all time. I know a lot of people and investors, they talk about FANG, and FANG is those four stocks that involve Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google. Best four stocks to have invested in at the beginning of this decade, right? If you didn't invest in those, then you kind of missed out, right? But what I'm trying to say is that Facebook didn't start off as one of the best investments of this decade. Facebook, when it IPO, did nothing. It didn't do anything. It moved sideways. It was flat until a couple of years until the chart presented itself as a good opportunity. So as an investor, or even from the perspective of an investor or trader, you don't want to just go in for the hype. You want to see when the charts present an opportunity. We can't just go into the market and say this is an opportunity. We just have to be aware of what's going on, and when we see something looking good, that's when we enter, right? So as an investment, I would say it would not be a good idea to get into this IPO immediately, right? And don't feel that fear of FOMO, like, oh, I hit this high, I missed out. That is what's going to ultimately be causing you to lose money, right? FOMO is just bad. I mean, think about Bitcoin. Bitcoin was going up. People had this FOMO, and people lost lots of money when it went from 20,000 to, 3,000 a share for, one Bitcoin, right? So you want to avoid that, right? At all costs. Now, from the perspective of a trader, we're just taking advantage of the intraday opportunities, and there are always intraday opportunities as long as you look for them. For example, I'm not going to go too hard into the technical analysis of Snowflake for today, but there was at one point where it hit a low of $231, then it crossed over the EMA line and had a nice solid uptrend where you could have made a potential 10% in like a couple of minutes, right? So again, as a trader, you're looking for those intraday opportunities. We're not looking at the long term. So again, traders and investors, you might want to wait till a longer time period before you start seeing results or just like opportunity to get into Snowflake. Traders, as long as you see the opportunity for the intraday, you wait for the confirmation, you sell out at validation. I have multiple videos talking about how to profit as a trader. Now, another thing I want to mention to also be cautious for the investors is that there has been talks that, Snowflake is going to offer more shares to the public, right? Now, what happens when there's more shares available to the public? That's going to create a selling pressure. So we might even see, more selling pressure for Snowflake, throughout a couple of months, right? So that's something you got to be aware of as an investor. You don't want to buy IPOs the first day. You're not going to buy an IPO, and this is, historically, you're not going to buy an IPO the first day and become like a millionaire after the first year. They generally don't work like that. They just take a little bit of time before the hype dies out and a true valuation of the stock is presented at a great opportunity to buy, hold, and invest. So that's really it, guys. Like I said, you got to really decide what you are looking at from, what are you trying to do with the stock? Are you an investor? Are you a trader? And then figure out what opportunities are you looking for. I have tons of videos talking about, technical analysis or charts. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below. I try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Also, I do have a link in the description below where if you sign up for Webull, you get one free stock using that link in the description. And I always recommend new traders to use Webull. It's a really great platform. I have videos talking about that as well. And then lastly, the first link in the description is a link to my free Facebook group, the Push and Profit Facebook group. It's basically a community of individuals that I'm building that are interested in the stock market. And in that group, I typically release a nightly watch list of stocks that I am long-term invested in. I talk about stocks that I'm focused on trading on. And I also bring a watch list of other stocks that present opportunities. I talk about penny stocks that, have opportunity to trade. I talk about, stocks with a lot of momentum. I have a lot of things on that watch list. Now, keep in mind, just because I have tickers on that watch list, it doesn't mean that you have to buy them. I simply just try to find areas that present opportunity, but it's your job to see if you see value in it and try to make a profit. But yeah, definitely check out that, link in the description below. It's going to be the first link. And with that being said, guys, again, my name is Justin from Push and Profit. Hope everyone's having a beautiful day today, and I'm out. Take care.